Hello, this is Mr. Underkoffler, and today we're just going to do a small little review on simplifying algebraic expressions. And these guys start with a review on the distributive property, which is something we learned about before. Follow along. It says when you have an addition or subtraction problem, and usually that addition or subtraction problem is going to be written in parentheses, and then it's being multiplied by a number, you can multiply each term of the sum or the difference by the multiplier. And I've given you three examples here. The first one is using all variables. You can see here A is the multiplier. Whenever you have a number next to parentheses with nothing in between, then it means that that number, or in this case variable, is multiplied to the problem inside of the parentheses. And so the distributive property says we can take A times B and also A times C. You can see I'm showing a little visual cue here with these curved arrows. So we get A times B plus A times C. So putting in terms of numbers, in this case, 4 is the multiplier, so we have 4 times 3n, 4 times 5, and then obviously we can simplify that. 4 times 3n is 12n, 4 times 5 is 20. Over here, may I remind you that subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. Now, we've talked about this numerous times this year. There are many times that we do not make subtraction become adding the opposite. But I've given you a little piece of advice here. When your multiplier is negative, and in this case the multiplier is the negative 4, then I suggest making subtraction become adding the opposite. And then you can multiply the negative 4 times the 9w, the negative 4 times the negative 2, and then continue from there. We get negative 36w, and a negative times a negative gives us positive 8. So that's a quick review on the distributive property. Next, quick review on like terms. Like terms, follow along. Terms that have the exact same variable or variables or no variable at all are called like terms. Now, why should we care? You can add or subtract like terms together. You can see this example right here. 18n plus 4n can simplify to become 22n. However, follow along, you cannot add or subtract unlike terms together. So for example, 18n plus 4 cannot be simplified any further because they are not like terms. They are unlike terms. And the reason why they're unlike terms is because the 4 does not have an n, but the 18n obviously does have an n. So they are not like terms. You cannot add them together to become 22n. All right, so here's what you do to simplify algebraic expressions. Follow along. You will do the distributive property first at any place that it can be done. Now, how do you know where the distributive property can be done? When you have an addition or subtraction problem in parentheses and a multiplier outside of those parentheses. That's where the distributive property can be done. So do that first at any place that it can be done. Next, after you finish the distributive property, then the second and final thing that you do is you add or subtract like terms together. Now I have an asterisk here. Follow along. Note, if you need to mentally use the commutative or associative properties to add in any order that you want, remember that's what those properties do, remember that those properties do not work with subtraction. You cannot switch the order however you want with subtraction, but you can with addition. So therefore, you would need to make subtraction become adding the opposite before you go about adding in any order that you want. Let's do a couple examples together, and then you'll do the rest of this on your own. The directions say, on each problem, simplify the algebraic expression. All right, problem number 1. We have distributive property with a negative 2 times the 18n minus 11, and then we also have plus 5n. That's not going to be part of the distributive property. So, like it says up here, do the distributive property first at any place where it can be done. Since the multiplier is the negative 2, then I'm going to make the subtraction inside of the parentheses become adding the opposite. All right, so the very first part that we do is the distributive property section of the problem, which is this part that I highlighted here. The plus 5n, which is not going to be part of the distributive property because it's not the multiplier and it's not inside of the parentheses. We're going to save that for later. So negative 2 times 18n and then negative 2 times the negative 11. So that's the distributive property being done. The multiplier was negative 2 it gets multiplied to the 18n, and it also gets multiplied to the negative 11. You do not have to highlight this. I'm just doing this to talk you through to make it easy for you to follow along with this video. Now, before you start adding like terms together, like I know some of you are like, oh, we're going to add 18n and 5n. No, 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 no. Order of operation says finish multiplication before you add. So we need to finish. Negative 2 times 18n would be negative 36n. And also, negative 2 times negative 11 is positive 22. Now that the multiplication has been completed, now we can go ahead and look for like terms and then add them together. Now we're going to have to use the commutative property mentally to kind of switch the order of the 22 and the 5n, because you should recognize that the 5n and the negative 36n, they both have n's, don't they? But the 22 does not. So we're going to add the like terms together. We're going to mentally in our head use the commutative property and move that 22 to the far right side. Add the like terms together. When you have a negative plus a positive, remember you subtract in your head, so that's why this is negative 31n, not negative 37n, and then we still have the plus 22. You can't go any further because that 22 does not have an n, but the negative 31 does have an n, so they are not like terms. You cannot add it together any further. This is it. This is as simple as we can make this expression, and there you go, negative 31n plus 22. You technically could write the 22 on the left, but I have found it traditional in algebra classes that normally the variable term gets written first before the constant, meaning the number with no variable at all. So traditionally, that's how you're going to see a lot of algebraic expressions being written as final answers in algebra textbooks. So I'm going to try to keep it that way on these guided notes and on this video. All right, problem number 2. First thing we look for is, do we have any place we can do the distributive property? No. There are no parentheses and a multiplier outside of parentheses. It doesn't exist here in number 2. Therefore, there is no distributive property to be done at all. We can now move right away to looking for like terms. You should notice that the 6 has a v and the 13 has a v, but they're not next to each other. And the note up here says that if you're going to mentally use the commutative or associative property, you have to realize you cannot switch the order with subtraction. You're going to have to make the subtraction become adding the opposite first. And that's exactly what I need to do here. Make subtraction become adding the opposite before I start mentally moving things around. So the 6v can be added to negative 13v. And that would give me negative 7v, then plus 18a. Now, the 18 has an a, the negative 7 has a v. Are they the same variables? No. Therefore, they are not like terms. You cannot add them together. Before I move on, you will also see in a lot of algebra textbooks that when there's 2 variable terms, traditionally in most textbooks, they will write the terms in alphabetical order. And so they'll put the 18a first, and then they would say plus negative 7v. But here's another thing that a lot of algebra teachers and algebra textbooks across America expect you to do. Instead of saying plus negative 7v, they would want you to write it in the slightly simpler way, and that is minus 7v. And so that's kind of making subtraction and adding the opposite, but kind of in reverse, making plus negative become minus a positive, just because it looks a little bit simpler that way. And I know we did briefly talk about that way earlier than the school year. So here I am refreshing your memory. Yes, you could technically, for me, write it as plus negative 7v, but a lot of algebra teachers are going to want you to say plus negative is the same as just minus a positive for the simplest form of the final answer. So I'm just teaching you that so that way you're aware. That is an expectation of a lot of teachers in high school and algebra teachers when it comes to writing things in simplest form for algebraic expressions. All right. There are, I believe, 5 problems remaining. Numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I want you to right now hit pause in the video, do the remaining 5 problems on your own, and then hit play to see how you did. All right, I hope you've already hit pause on the video and you have finished these guided notes problems on your own. I'm now going to go over them to see how you did. So problem number 3, we have 9 times in parentheses 7 plus 2x. That's the distributive property part. You should have done that first. 9 times the 7 and 9 times the 2x, because that is the distributive property section of the problem. 9 times 7 is 63. 9 times 2x is 18x. Since we're going to need to switch the order here mentally, because the two numbers with no variables are like terms to each other, and that is why I would go ahead and, you can see I already did this, I made the subtraction become adding the opposite here, and then 63 plus negative 10 will give you 53. I like to write with the variable term first, 18x plus 53. All right, problem number 4. Since we have the distributive property section of the problem being this part here, the multiplier, you see how there's a minus to the left of it? You need to make this adding the opposite so that you realize that it's not a multiplier of 8, it's a multiplier of negative 8. Maybe you made an error here. If you made an error, hit pause on the video, fix it, and if you think you therefore made errors on other problems coming up, 5, 6, or 7, because you made the same type of mistake here in number 4, then again, hit pause, fix your errors, then hit play to see how you did. All right, let's finish the multiplication here. Negative 8 times 9, negative 72, negative 8 times m, negative 8m. Who are the like terms? It's the two constants, the two numbers with no variables at all. So 4 plus negative 72 would give you negative 68. I like to put the variable term first, so that'd be negative 8m plus negative 68. You can see I changed the plus negative 68 to become minus a positive because, like I said a minute or two ago, algebra teachers consider that to be the simpler form of writing the expression. Instead of plus negative, you write it as minus positive. All right, problem number 5. The distributive property is the part here with the parentheses and the multiplier negative 12. Since we have a negative multiplier, I would make the adding the opposite inside of the parentheses where the subtraction was located. All right, we take negative 12 times 9q, also negative 12 times negative 6. Finish up the multiplication. You're going to get negative 108q. A negative 12 times the negative 6 is positive 72. Who are the like terms? Well, it's the negative 108q and the 40q. Add them together. You're actually going to subtract in your head because it's a negative plus a positive. And you get negative 68q plus 72, and you are done with that problem. Problem number 6. Is there a part to do distributive property on? No. So you're just going to have to switch things around using the commutative property, but that means you need to make subtraction adding the opposite here, and also subtraction adding the opposite here. I know that's kind of weird having a negative x, but that's just the way it's going to be. Now, speaking of that negative x, that is the same as negative 1x. So negative 4x, negative 1x, they are like terms. Therefore, you should end up adding them together. The other pair of like terms on this problem are the two constants, the two numbers with no variables at all. They are like terms, which means this 8y, poor 8y, he's not like terms with anybody, so he's just going to say 8y. Negative 4x plus negative 1x is negative 5x. Then we have the plus 8y, and then we have the sum of the 71 and 32, which is 103, and that's it. That's simplest form for number 6. All right, last problem to go. We have number 7. We have, where's the distributive property? It is the parentheses, and there is a multiplier next to the parentheses. This was a little tricky. I put the multiplier to the right of the parentheses. That 3 has no space between it and the parentheses, so the 3 is the multiplier. So, as we kind of have been doing on so many problems, it does seem to be helpful to make subtraction adding the opposite on a lot of these problems. So here we go. 3 is the multiplier. We are going to take 3 times that negative 21, and we're also going to take the 3 times the negative 5y. All right, finish the multiplication. 3 times negative 21 is negative 63. 3 times negative 5y is negative 15y. Who are the like terms? It is the three constants, the three numbers that have no variables at all. They can be added together, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to write the variable term first, negative 15y, and then I'm going to add the two negatives together first, which will give me negative 81, and the negative 81 plus the 82 would give me positive 1 because you were subtracting in your head 82 minus 81, and there you go. You get negative 15y plus 1. And that concludes these very short guided notes on reviewing how to simplify algebraic expressions. It's been a great school year, guys. We'll see you later.